see the world through other people's eyes. Now, empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.
Hi, it's Edwin Rutsch, and this is Dialogues on How to Build a Culture of Empathy. And today I'm here with Maria Seehausen. Thanks, Maria, for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me.
So first, I wanted to hear a little bit about your background. The way I kind of got in contact with you is you'd had with a group you'd done a study called Effects of Empathic Paraphrasing, Extrinsic Emotion Regulation in Social Conflict. And so I want to talk about that study that you did, but first maybe just hear a little bit about your background and,
Sure. Well, I'm a psychologist and I do research in neuroscience here in Berlin. And I also do some freelance work as a mediator and coach and a trainer. And I've done that for about 4 years. But this year, that's sort of on hold because I'm focusing on getting my doctorate thesis now. And so I'm just doing the university work and the research stuff this year mostly. But the way I got in touch with this whole topic of empathy and regulating emotions through empathy is because of my work as a mediator, which I started doing in Canada, I think 2004. And I did community mediation there in Toronto with a conflict resolution service there. And then later in Germany, I also started doing business mediation and family mediation. And one of the core techniques we use in mediation is empathic paraphrasing, or active listening, if you want to call it that. So we did that the whole time. We asked questions and we paraphrase. And I noticed that there's this effect on emotions when I paraphrase somebody and they just exhale and they look really relieved and they say, yes, that's exactly it. And they lean back and they just relax. And I thought that's really interesting and I would like to see how that works because I don't know any research who's been looking into that. So I started doing this neuroscience research, trying to ban that effect on paper or on fMRI, if you say it that way. Mm-hmm. So this is how we started out doing this. And this study that you saw was actually the first one of a series of 3 studies, and it was supposed to be just a pilot study for the neuroimaging task. But then we just thought that's really interesting results, so we decided to publish it. But we actually have 2 more studies coming, who hopefully will be published soon, sort of go in the same direction.
Oh, well, that's great because, I've also done mediation, training and, circle process. And we actually have something called empathy circles where we're starting where we have small groups online to do to build a culture of empathy, which is really what our center is about. Like, how do we foster empathy within society? And we use that reflective listening process in it. So I was like really excited to see your study and especially all the research you'd done about you'd documented all the research around it as well. So, and I hadn't seen any other study like this, so I was really, really glad to have a chance to talk to you about the study.
Yes, I think it's a very, very important subject, and it has been thoroughly studied within medical research, as you've seen also in the text that I've written. But I think there's still a lot of research lacking pertaining to the effects of empathy on somebody. There's lots and lots of research on empathy itself, also in neuroimaging research. And I know that you know a lot about this research because you've done a lot of interviews too. But to my knowledge, there's almost no research on what happens if somebody is treating you in an empathic way, what happens in the brain, for example, when somebody is saying something to you that's empathic. And that's the sort of stuff I'm interested in. Also, seeing how emotions can be regulated by having somebody listen to you in an empathic way. So that's what we are working on right now.
Mm-hmm. So when you say an empathic way, I mean, it's like, I guess maybe we should start with what's your definition of empathy? I've talked to people like Dan Batson, who's written, about empathy, and he says, it's used in a lot of different ways, and he's laid out at least 8 ways that the word empathy is used. And he says, everybody's using the word differently, but the important thing is articulate your definition and stick to it. So how are you kind of defining empathy?
Well, we are working with cognitive empathy and emotional empathy. In the way cognitive empathy defined as a theory of mind, that you are able to see somebody else's perspective. And this is what you can demonstrate through paraphrasing, by repeating what somebody else said and also clarifying that you understood what is important to them and what he means to say, even though maybe he didn't use the precise words. You show that you are able to take over somebody's perspective. And in this way, you demonstrate cognitive empathy. And in other experiments, we have also worked with emotional empathy in the sense of showing emotional concern or empathic concern, that you say, I care how you feel. It affects me how you feel. So that's the emotional empathy in the sense of having emotional consequences when you see somebody else suffer, for example. Oh. So that's the two types of empathy that we are working with. Okay. But the type I'm more interested in is the cognitive empathy, because that's the one that's usually used in a professional setting, like, for example, in mediation.
Well, can I just give you my kind of definition of empathy, how I'm using it? I'm using empathy as kind of seeing it as 4 parts. So the first part would be self-empathy. So that's sensory awareness, mindfulness of what's going on inside my own body as a felt sense. And then there's mirrored empathy, which would be through mirror neurons. So as I see you and you see me, you see my hands waving, right? You see my hands waving, and then your neurons are firing, kind of simulating that hand waving. And I'm seeing you sit, now I'm seeing you smile, so I can feel the mirror neurons are firing to simulate what your physical state, as well as the emotions that are connected to that physical state. So anyway, that's kind of the mirrored empathy. Then there's the cognitive empathy, which is what you're talking about, which I'm calling imaginative empathy, in that we're kind of imagining what someone else's situation is, kind of based on perspective taking and awareness of self as a separate being. And then the fourth part of empathy is empathic creativity or empathic action, which is that as we kind of connect with each other, we kind of see our common humanity, and that we act out of that common humanity, wanting kind of the welfare, contribute to the well-being of others. So that's kind of like the basic framework I use. I'm just wondering, it seems to kind of fit with what your definition. I'm just wondering kind of what your feedback is or your thoughts are about that model.
Yeah, I think it fits. The mirror neurons and the whole motor empathy is obviously something that we didn't study, but we are also well aware that it's important as well. We just focus on the verbal parts of empathy, because that's what we work with. I'm in the project of this, we call it's called Cluster of Excellence, Languages of Emotion, which is a joint project of the Free University in Berlin and the Charité. So we work on projects involving language and emotion. And that's why we're sort of not focusing on the whole mirror neuron part, because we're just interested in what does language actually do to regulate emotion. And the last part you talked about caring. How do you call it again?
I call it empathic creativity or empathic action.
Right. Yeah, that's probably something that involves emotional empathy, right? This empathic concern for other people and trying to form a connection with them because you care about them. That sounds pretty similar to me.
Yeah, it's kind of as we connect with each other, it's almost as if our reality becomes a shared reality, and we're kind of like wired, it seems, to want to contribute to the well-being of others, assist, or if it's not just if you're in sad or like compassion where it's with suffering, but it's also, I do freestyle dance, right? And we're doing a lot of mirroring and dancing, and it's a lot of fun, and And we're contributing. I do like mirroring of people, the physical level, and you can really get into connection with people, and you're playing creatively off of each other. So I think for me, that's kind of like based on empathy too. It's just kind of like heightening our joy and like that too.
Yeah, we also have a project at university. I don't know who the researcher on that one is, but they are doing a training of empathy based on dance.
Oh.
So because I think they've already shown that you can improve empathy by, doing pair dancing, because if you move simultaneously, just like you said, it's going to improve your empathic understanding of the other person, sort of like you mirror them in a physical way. And I think that's really interesting too. I kind of really like that project.
Yeah, I've done it physically too, where I've consciously mirrored people, and what I found is I mirror people, and at some point we kind of click together, and from that it creates like a common connection, and then it's dance. You're like moving so fast. There's like you can't think about it, right? Because things are happening at a split second. And so you already know the intention of where they're going, and they know my intention, and then we're adding new energy and new creative moves. So it's a really fun part. Well, we can talk about that later. I want to get to your study. So, maybe we can just... so you're talking about paraphrasing. We're talking about the cognitive empathy, or kind of the imaginative empathy, and you use the word paraphrasing. How do you kind of break that down? Like, I could be mirroring you, just reflecting exactly what you say, or I can paraphrase you, which is kind of say generally what you're saying, but kind of from using my own words. Like, how are you kind of breaking that down? Do you know what I mean? The different ways of reflecting, or maybe even summarizing. I'm just summarizing what you say. I'm not fully reflecting it, and I'm just wondering how you break that down.
Well, there are several levels on which you can do paraphrasing, like you already said, right? You can just repeat every word of what somebody else said, but that would be pretty boring. And you wouldn't demonstrate that you can actually understand anything, because you could just repeat without even really deeply listening. And then you can go to a more abstract level of just summarizing. And you could also add another level of talking about the emotions that this person is experiencing, and sort of reading between the lines and saying, for example, I hear that you're angry, and I understand that this is because you think you've been treated unfairly and you expect somebody to treat you with respect. Did I understand that correctly? So this is sort of what I do. I summarize, but I also try to infer what's beneath the feelings of somebody. I try to sort of tap into their value system and show them that I understand what is important to them. That's the way I do paraphrasing.
Okay.
And I think that's probably also why it's effective, because it's not just merely repeating what somebody said, but really I demonstrate that I really try to think about this person's belief system and value system, and how the world looks to them. And I think that's the thing that does the effect on people.
Are you familiar with nonviolent communication, in terms of there you're kind of reflecting, but you're also looking for the underlying needs, which might be the values which you're referring to? It could be needs or values. Is that?
Yeah, you mean like Rosenberg?
Yeah, Rosenberg.
Yes, I'm familiar with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's very similar, only you don't talk about your own values or your own needs, but you talk about the values and needs of somebody else, right? Because Rosenberg works through opening yourself up and making yourself vulnerable, I think, and showing yourself as a person, and then asking somebody what you need from them. And paraphrasing is sort of, in my understanding, could be like the other way around. You show that you understand, and maybe then in mediation you have a little request. So now that I understand you, would it be possible for you to also listen to the other party? That's what we do, right?
Right. Well, great. How about can we just go through your study? Maybe just kind of start at the top and just hear all about kind of what you did, and kind of just go through it step by step.
Okay. So what we did is we invited people for an interview, and we asked them to talk about a personal conflict they have with a roommate or a friend or a family member, and it should be a currently experienced ongoing conflict. And we wanted them to have some level of emotional involvement. And then I had an interview guideline consisting of 10 questions, open questions like what exactly bothers you and what did you try to solve it, and that kind of thing. And when they answered, I either paraphrased what they said, or in our control condition, I just silently took notes. And in this way, we had a comparison between paraphrasing and something else, the control condition. And every time I did that, we asked them to indicate on a scale how they felt right now. And also, we had their pulse and their skin conductance level measured, which is like the conductivity, the electrical conductivity of the skin, which is a measurement of autonomic arousal and emotional arousal. And we found out that they felt better, not surprisingly, when they were being paraphrased compared to when I just took notes. But what was surprising was that their emotional arousal was actually higher doing paraphrasing than doing taking notes. And we expected the other thing. We initially expected that paraphrasing would have a calming effect, which is what I was talking about in the beginning. You know, just visibly you see somebody lean back, exhale, and look relaxed. So that's what I expected to see in the study as well. But it turned out differently. And apparently it's the case that paraphrasing stimulates an emotion processing in the person being paraphrased, because sort of you reflect back to them what they feel, and sometimes it's not pleasant what they feel. In the social conflict, there's often hurt and anger. And I think when you paraphrase, you sort of gently push that person towards confronting that feeling. So what happens was that people got more agitated or more aroused during paraphrasing. But then when we measured their voice intensity, the next time they answered the question, we found that after paraphrasing, voice intensity was lower, which is an indication that at this point in time, their arousal had already subsided again. And we thought that's really interesting because we interpret it in a way that paraphrasing first heightens arousal and then lowers it. And this could be a sign that there is some sort of emotional resolve happening in the conflict. We don't really know that yet because we don't have longitudinal measurements. We don't know what happened in the long run in the conflict. But one of our ideas is that it could possibly be that when you offer somebody acknowledgement and empathy, that they are able to sort of open up and deal with their emotions in a better way because they feel validated and maybe also held in a way. And it's safer for them to look at their emotions now. And I think that's maybe clarifying and could help to resolve the conflict in the long run.
So, okay, let me paraphrase here. So you did your study. You had two groups. So in one group, somebody would be talking about their problem, and you would just be writing down what it is that they were saying, and not saying anything.
Exactly. Not exactly. We didn't have two groups. We had one group of people, but we had one condition. So the whole group got the condition of paraphrasing and the condition of taking notes alternately.
Oh, I see.
So one question I would paraphrase, and the next question I would take notes.
Okay, so then they're all kind of taking notes with one group, and then the other group you're all paraphrasing with them, so you're doing both with them. So then with the people who are being paraphrased, you're reflecting back what they're hearing, what they're saying, you're kind of not just reflecting, you're also kind of going deeper into what their values are, maybe what their intentions are, like that, in terms of the paraphrasing. And then what you're finding is that when you're doing that reflection or that paraphrasing, that they're kind of getting more excited, or more. You're saying arousal, so maybe we could use a different word for arousal because I'm not quite sure what you're meaning. Are you meaning there's like more excitement, more energy? Is that emotional energy, or what is that arousal?
It's probably something like that. Yes, we talk about emotional arousal or autonomic arousal, which is just the nervous system getting more active in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Sympathetic nervous system would be more active, and that's probably just emotional energy, as you call it.
Blood pressure's going up, heart rate.
Yes, heart rate is going up. The blood volume pulse is going down, which also means that there's more activation, more sympathetic activation. And the skin conductance is also going up, which is also a sign of, being emotionally agitated.
Okay. So what you're and then a while after that, you're measuring it again, and then they're actually they're calmer at that point. Like in a certain amount of time afterwards. Like I don't know how long it was that you're.
Well, what we did was we recorded participants' voices. So, and we analyzed their voices in terms of the volume of their voice. And we could show that, so I ask a question, they answer. I paraphrase, I ask a question, they answer again. And then the second time they answer, I take their voice and I analyze how loudly they speak. And I compare that to the condition of I ask a question, they answer, I take notes. I ask a question, they answer again. And when I take notes, their voice is just louder. First, when they paraphrase and then they speak again, their voice is calmer. And that could be a sign that they are calmer after paraphrasing, because, the voice intensity is also a measurement of agitation or emotional engagement.
Okay, whoop. Are you there?
Yes, I'm still
your
here.
video just dropped out. Oh, there you are. Sorry, for a second your video went black, but it's okay now. So what you were kind of speculating then is that through the paraphrasing, that that you're able to kind of go more into.
My video just went black.
I know
again.
it kind of goes black, back and forth a little here. We'll see. Hopefully it'll be okay. We might have to reestablish the call. Sometimes that kind of helps. But it's kind of like as you're paraphrasing someone, you're going into they're able to go into the emotion more, and that that's kind of what I'm hearing. You speculate, and that through going deeper into the emotion, that kind of the paraphrasing allows them to go more deeply into the emotion, and thereby maybe resolve it more.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we're doing a study now where we try to test the. Oh, now I'm blank again. Damn it.
Yeah. I'll just recall you, and I'll just hang up and call you, and maybe that'll help. It just takes a second here. Is that okay?
Okay, sure. Okay.
Okay, well, let's hope. I don't know if it's Skype or the camera or what. So, yeah, I think we're good.
All right. Yeah, so I just wanted to say that right now we're doing a study where we're trying to test the idea that when you paraphrase and you offer somebody empathy, you also help them to be empathic towards other people on their themselves. So what we do now is we have the same structure of interview that they lie in the MRI now in the scanner, and I do the interview with them, and I paraphrase what they say, and afterwards they listen to the interview again, they listen to themselves and listen to me speaking, and they rate how they felt and how understood they felt during the interview, and every now and then the interview stops and they are being asked the question, how much would you be willing to consider the other party's perspective right now, which is the other party in conflict, the party they are having the problem with. And my hypothesis is that after paraphrasing, it's easier for people to open up for the other party's perspective. And we don't have the results yet, so I just hope it's going to work out. But we have good reason to believe that when you offer somebody empathy, you help them being empathic themselves, right? I don't know if you're familiar with the mimicry results. I also cited some of that in my study.
No, I didn't. What was the mimicry?
Mimicry is you mimic somebody's facial movements. For example, when you smile, I smile. When you frown, I frown. And I think it's really interesting research. And it has shown that not only does mimicry create affiliation between the two people talking to each other, it also creates a pro-social orientation in general. So let's say I mimic you, and when you go out again, you would feel so much more helpful and so much more pro-social towards everybody in general, just because you have been mimicked, right? So they have done studies that after the mimicry, the subjects who had been mimicked were brought in a situation where somebody else needed help, and they found that after they had been mimicked, they were so much more willing to help somebody else, even though they had nothing to do with the whole mimicry situation. And I think that's really interesting. So we are hoping that paraphrasing or empathic paraphrasing creates an effect similar to that. Like when I paraphrase somebody, it may be that this creates a more pro-social orientation in that person, and they are being able and more willing to open up to other people, including the party in conflict.
Yeah, I call that resilience, and I've had that experience. I've done some like workshops that are like mediation workshops where there's a lot of empathy. Like we're doing, kind of circle work, and I'm just being empathized with, and I find that that I personally, just from my own anecdotal experience, feel much more grounded and centered in myself. And I remember once that happened, and then I went into the dance, the next day, and I could feel so much more connected to everyone. And I had, and then I was doing that mirroring that I was talking about, that kind of reflective dance. When I went into the dance, I said, I didn't say it verbally, but I said it to myself, I want to really get who you are, but through reflecting who you are. And I really felt really deeply grounded in doing that, and it really helped my dance, and I had these really great dances out of that. So just from an anecdotal kind of experience, I've experienced that, and I guess I was using the word resilience, that we kind of, through being heard and seen, that we kind of develop a sense of connection to ourselves, which maybe can kind of pass on to others.
Yes. Maybe the psychological term for that would be something like self-worth. Like, I'm just speculating here, right? But I could, I can imagine that if somebody gives you recognition and is behaving in an empathic way, and you connect with them, that you feel validated and you feel worthy, and you feel just really good about yourself. And in this way, you can also go out and connect to other people more easily, because you feel more sure of yourself. And when you're sure of yourself, you don't have to defend your borders so hard. I see very often that's what happens to people in conflict. I don't know if you're familiar with that theory of Bush and Folger.
No.
Done Transformative Mediation. I think that's something that you probably might be really interested in too. That's the first type of mediation that I learned. They call it transformative mediation because they don't just want to settle the conflict, but they also want to achieve a transformation in really in the way that people relate to each other. And they call it empowerment and recognition. And they try to empower people of being able to solve their own conflicts and being able to connect to each other and really be rooted in themselves, as you just described it. And also being able to give recognition to the other person. And they do that by giving recognition to the parties themselves as a mediator. And their theory is that in conflict, people just shut down their borders and they get this tunnel view because they feel that they have to defend their interests because they feel threatened. So if you give them recognition, they don't feel threatened so much because they see that somebody's on their side or somebody's trying to help them, so they don't have to fight so hard. And in this way, they can open up more, and they're also willing to give other people recognition. And I think that's really interesting.
Yes.
And it sounds like something you just described.
Yeah, it's as we are. It's like as we're seen and feel that, you know. For myself, as I feel I'll be seen by others, I don't have to kind of fight to be seen, or something like that. It's like somehow there's some kind of a need that we have, or that we want to be, you know, seen by others and heard by others, and maybe even reflected by others. That there may be some kind of a biological, you know, human social need for empathy, really. And if we don't have that sense of connection, you know, it causes stress. And
yes, definitely. There's a psychiatrist called Eric Byrne, I think, who's done some research on that, and he said that I think what you just described, that humans really have a very basic need of getting recognition from other people, who's even in the way that if they don't get that, it's almost like nobody ever touched them in a physical way. But he said that we replace that need for physical touch because we don't have that so much through the need for recognition and, you know, just the metaphorical touch with other people in a way. And he said that if you don't get that, you're going to be very unhealthy very soon.
Yeah, so, and that touch for me is really the empathy. I guess that's kind of like the mirroring that I was talking about for on the mirrored empathy, that, you know, as we're reflecting each other and paraphrasing, that we're kind of like syncing up emotionally, right? That my emotion, I'm seeing my emotion reflected in you, and it's kind of like it's going from the cognitive, I guess, empathy to the emotional empathy as well. You're kind of like emotionally being mirrored and reflected.
Yeah, that's probably what people call motor empathy too. That you just sort of mirror somebody on the physical level, and this whole topic of shared networks and mirror neurons that you already talked about with some people as well. And I also use this mirroring people in coaching because we know that it also creates affiliation, and it's something that happens automatically if you're talking to somebody and you feel that you really connect. You can watch two people talk to each other, and you will see that they automatically, without noticing, assume the same postural stance, and they mirror their gestures without even noticing it. And you could also use that on purpose, just to form a connection to somebody. And psychotherapists do that to build rapport sometimes, because it really helps. I also use it to understand what somebody feels sometimes. If I don't really get it on a cognitive way, I sit down in front of somebody, and I sit down the same way he or she sits, and I try to mirror exactly what the person does. And then I just listen to my own sensations and my own feelings. And in this way, I get an understanding of what the other person is feeling. And that works really well. I've done that in training with people a lot. And I've asked them, for example, one person thinks about something pleasant or unpleasant, anything emotional they had experienced. And they don't tell the other person what it is. They just think about it. And you just sit there and you try to mirror them on a physical level by sitting in the same way, breathing in the same way, or smiling in the same way, whatever. And then you just close your eyes and you try to guess what the other person is thinking about. And I find that people get really close. Like they say, "Oh, I feel like I'm in the forest, and I don't know, the sun is shining on my face." And the other person says, "No, you didn't get it at all. I was sitting on a really, really nice, I don't know, I was sitting by a nice lake and the sun was shining in my face. You didn't get it.
Uh-huh. Oh,
That's really funny.
Yeah. That's a great exercise. I'm going to have to use that one for our empathy circle.
Yeah,
you know, our empathy circle, we actually start the empathy circle with kind of a mindfulness, a little bit of meditation, and then tapping into some kind of a emotion, some kind of a felt sense. And then we do a physical manifestation of it, while our eyes are closed. And then the whole group goes around and we all reflect it physically. So that's kind of like similar, to, and then I can imagine the next step would be now, what is it that person is expressing? What are they feeling? So it could be like a next step or something.
Yeah, yeah. I think that would work really well, especially with that first exercise of listening to your own body, feeling your own sensation, because that increases your perception, right? So you would be more sensitive than when you go into that exercise. And people already made a lot of progress with, for example, compassion meditation, right? So people have shown that even to the point of changes in the brain, compassion meditation can help improve empathy.
Yeah, I think that compassion, that meditation is maybe the self-empathy. It's really kind of tuning into the felt sense. What are we really feeling in our bodies? And from what I was hearing, what you were saying is that what you do is you physically, if you're not understanding where the person's coming from, you're physically mirroring them, and in that way kind of getting an access into what it is that's going on for them at kind of a cognitive level.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's really interesting how that's connected, right? Like you use the motor empathy and you get an idea on a cognitive route what the other person might be thinking about. Obviously, you don't read their mind or something, but you get into a similar emotional state, and then because we have this shared world, really, the shared world of thoughts and feelings, you can really get very close to what the other person is thinking about and experiencing right now.
Well, there's a couple of kind of stories that come up around that. One is, there's a quote I read somewhere, is that when people are free to do whatever they want, they imitate each other. Right? It's that people are kind of like geared towards this mirroring of each other, and when they're free to do whatever. And I've seen that in dance too. Sometimes in dance, the instructor says, "Okay, just walk around the room, freely." Everybody starts walking, and suddenly they're all kind of walking the same way. It's like we kind of like sync up with each other. Maybe that's what accents are like. And then I've also heard, people tell me, I think it was even Alexander Poe. He wrote that he would watch people and then physically mirror their faces to see what it is that they're feeling. So this goes back quite a ways then to this, really mirroring other people at a physical level to really kind of understand them. So
yeah, I'm sure it's not a new idea. Sometimes the modern science just rediscovers something that has been known so much longer.
Yeah. You put them in the scanner to kind of confirm kind of old wives' tales and stuff. Yeah. It's like my mother always.
I feel like
my mother always used to say, sorrows shared or sorrows halved, joys shared or joys doubled, which is a little bit like just empathy and maybe oxytocin or something, kind of coming in, and I think the science kind of shows that now. So is there more to your study that you want to go into? Like, was that the gist of it, or was there more to the overall study?
Well, this was the first one. That's just a small study that we did. And we are now doing two other studies, or we have done two other studies following up on that. And the first one is already completed, and we have the results, and it will hopefully be published soon. And in this one, we try to find out how empathy is being processed in the brain. Like not feeling empathy, but receiving empathic comments from somebody else. So if I paraphrase you or say something empathic to you, what would happen in your brain? And we also compared what happens when somebody offers you cognitive empathy versus when somebody offers you emotional empathy. And we found out that these two are actually being processed in different ways. And there are brain regions who respond to empathic comments, for example, the postcentral gyrus or the cerebellum, which are also regions who process social emotions and respond to social cues. So it makes sense that they would also be active in responding to empathic comments. But it's really interesting to see how emotional empathy works and how cognitive empathy works. So we are trying to compare these two and sort of find out the neural networks lying below the receiving empathic comments. So that's the one study we did. And then the other one is the one I already mentioned before, where we just did the interviews in the scanner. And we are trying to see what happens while people talk about the social conflict and what happens while they listen to paraphrasing. And then we also try to show that through paraphrasing, we would help them to become more empathic themselves. So this is what I said, that afterwards they listen to the interview again and they rate how empathic they felt. So we're trying to use that rating to see what happens in the brain when somebody feels that he's being understood, and what happens in the brain if somebody feels he's not understood, and then what happens in the actual behavior, because we're also trying to fill that gap towards the pro-social, the helping behavior, or the behavior of resolving the conflict, which is what I'm interested in the long run, right? So does this empathic paraphrasing really help to resolve the social conflict with the other person? So that's what I'm trying to find out now. But this one, we don't have the results yet. So the first study was really just a pre-study to this one. And I'm hoping that we can replicate this result and also sort of get an idea of the neural pathway underlying these processes happening here.
Well, this is a great study and work that you're doing, because a lot of this research is around the mindfulness and the meditation, and I've really been interested in this whole conflict resolution, reflective listening, kind of the work, kind of the thread of Carl Rogers and his reflective listening kind of approach, which I guess paraphrasing kind of builds on that as well. And I'm not that familiar with very much study around it, so I'm really excited about the work that you're doing, really taking it and kind of breaking it down kind of step by step and kind of studying each of the components of it, and I think that's really helpful.
Yeah. What I would also be interested in is seeing what happens in the long run, because right now we're just measuring the short-term consequences of active listening, but in this study that's not included, but maybe some other study might be able to cover it. I think it would be really interesting to see if empathic paraphrasing or active listening actually helps to resolve the conflict. And I don't know what your experience is. You said that you also have done mediations. And my experience was that I've done about maybe 60, 70 cases in community mediation, where I just did the case development and talked to the parties on the phone about the conflict. And I found that if I do only active listening and empathic paraphrasing, very often it happens that people get even more agitated in a way that they are even surer now that they are right and the other person is wrong. I have my doubts that this technique of empathic paraphrasing is really all it takes. But I think it's a very important step, the first step. But I'm guessing that you probably have to do something else after that to really help people open up and reconsider also their the cognitive ideas and their thoughts about the other person. Because this we called it venting. I don't know if you still use that term, but I found that this whole venting sometimes only leads to more narrow thinking. So I would be interested in doing a study, or maybe see somebody else do a study, or the long-term consequences. So what happens if you do the paraphrasing first and then help them readjust their way of thinking of the other person? So
so it's
I don't.
So it sounds like that's when you're doing rephrasing, paraphrasing of people. It sounds like you're doing it on the phone or kind of other ways of doing it, and then it just gets people more agitated about it, and that they're kind of becoming more self-righteous or whatever within their own point of view, and it's like you're looking for how to kind of resolve that, or
Yeah, sometimes that's what happened when I talk to people on the phone. Maybe not that they became more agitated, but that they just were so sure that they are right. And I think in mediation, we remedy that problem by having both parties in the room. So you listen to both parties, right? And they also listen to each other. And maybe it helps if you not only speak about your own perspective, but also hear the other person's perspective. But I'm not sure if you don't hear that other person's perspective, you wouldn't have that correction of, oh, there's somebody who also has a valid view.
Yeah.
Maybe I should reconsider some of my thinking. So I'm thinking that if you just talk to one person, probably the active listening wouldn't do the whole job. For example, if I have somebody in coaching, I don't usually stop at doing the empathic listening, but I also, at some point, when I feel that there is a good rapport and I understand where the other person is coming from, I try to challenge their ideas about the situation and their way of thinking. And I suspect that this is necessary to adjust the whole emotional processing. But we don't really know that because we haven't done any follow-up measuring on the empathic study yet.
Well, what are the mediation processes that you've used? I mean, there's quite a few different ones out there. I'm wondering what the one is that you're using. Kind of what's the flow of it?
Well, what I was talking about right now was the first one, the first concept of mediation I used in Canada. That's the transformative mediation of Bush and Foger. And they rely very much on this whole process of giving empowerment and recognition. So a lot of mediation is filled with, active listening and just trying to validate people. And it's not so much structured in a way. And then when I came back to Germany, I learned a very different approach. Because in Germany, mediation is a very structured process, going through different phases. And in the first phase, you would just, you would do the whole preparations and stuff. And in the second phase, you just collect the topics people want to talk about. And you don't have them talk to each other at this point at all, but you only have them talk to the mediator. And then when you have a complete list of topics, in the third phase, you go into each topic deeply. And you still only talk to one person at a time and not have them talk to each other so much. And you try to find out what is important to them concerning this topic. So you really try to get their interests and their needs and have the other party listen to that. And then on in the fourth phase, when every topic has been talked about, and there's this transformative moment happening that people can really see each other as human beings and open up. When you feel that this has happened, you start talking about possible solutions. And you just gather ideas and you brainstorm. And then in the next phase, you would evaluate these ideas and see which one works best. And then in the end, find a solution. So this is a very structured way of going through mediation, which is not what I saw happening in Canada. But I think both concepts have their own value in a way. They are just very different. In Canada, I found that people react to this emotional opening up a lot more, and they are willing to do that. And in Germany, it's sometimes not so. It could also be because I've done business mediations here, and it's very different, obviously. But people are more structured, and they're not as willing to talk about emotions so fast. So you sort of have to take it slowly and in a processed and structured way. What is the way that you've done mediations?
Well, there's one. We have a mediation center here in Berkeley. I live near Berkeley, California. It's just down the road a little ways. And their process is you bring the two disputants, into a room together, and then you have two mediators. And then as mediators, you talk to each side, and you just explore, like you're talking about, you're exploring the topics that are coming up, and you're kind of articulating them, and you're empathizing with the disputants, but they're not talking to each other. So you do that with both sides. You're kind of taking notes to lay out what all the different issues are. Then at some point you turn the two to each other, and then they start dialoguing with each other. And sometimes you can ask for them to kind of reflect a little bit to each other. And if things kind of break down, you might say, well, can you paraphrase or reflect what you're hearing? So you're kind of assisting the two sides to kind of create it, empathically start listening to each other. And then the same thing happens is that they go deeper and deeper into the conflict, into the emotions. And at some point there seems to be a connection that happens, like some shared value that they can kind of connect with. And then on top of it, then once that kind of happens, it becomes like the foundation to start going into that, what I would call empathic creativity, is like, okay, what do we do now? Right? And then people start brainstorming like, well, we can meet every week, for a coffee and discuss things, so we can resolve conflicts, on an ongoing basis, or, I'll chop down the tree that's hanging over, your yard, or just anything like that. So that's kind of one structure. There's another process called restorative circles, which is a conflict process. It's more in a circle process developed by Dominic Barter in Brazil that's kind of getting some traction here in the United States. And that's that you bring, someone says, I have a conflict and I want to bring this into a circle, and then the facilitator listens to them, kind of finds what the problem is, and then that person who's bringing the conflict says who they would like in the circle. The facilitator goes to each person, says, would you like to be in the circle? And they kind of listen deeply, so they're kind of modeling the empathic listening, doing reflection. And then they say, who would you like in the circle? And then it goes all the way around until everybody that needs to be in the circle is invited to the circle. They hold the circle, and it starts off with a reflective listening. Like, one person speaks, the other person reflects back, and then when that person feels fully heard, then it's the turn of the person who was spoken to speak to someone else, and it just kind of ping-pongs, back and forth like that. And then they explore the conflict at the present, then they explore the conflict and like when the conflict happened, the event happened, then they explore that. And then kind of that connection kind of happens, and it's like, what do we do now? And that empathic creativity or empathic action kind of part takes place. So there's a very similar kind of flow that I've noticed in these different mediation processes.
Yes, I think probably the common aspect of all these structures is that this moment of connection is happening at some point, right?
Yeah.
So people they come into the mediation being, oh, okay, here I am again.
There you are, okay.
My picture just went black again. So when they come into the mediation, they are really so much focused on themselves and their own interests, right? And whatever you do, whatever structure you use, at some point in mediation, if it is successful, there's this transformative moment happening that they are able to see each other, like really see each other, and not just focus on themselves so much.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, and it's that whole process. So what you're really doing, it looks like your work is you're wanting to take that whole process and really start exploring it and scientifically exploring it, creating studies to really kind of explore and create the research behind it and how this process works, and maybe how to improve the processes too. Yeah,
exactly. And I'm trying to bridge the gap between practice and research, because sometimes these two are just each pursuing a different road, and they are sort of living in parallel worlds sometimes. So I'm trying to bring some of my practical experience into my research topics, and then maybe also bring some research and some results of the research back into the practice, and have these connect and really, work on the same road. So that's what I'm hoping to achieve by that.
And what is that road? Like, you're wanting to bring research and practice together on the same road, and what is that road, would you say?
I don't know, maybe one that... Well, I don't really know where this is leading. I just think that research and practice should work together, and practitioners can really benefit from what researchers have found out if we make it accessible to them and explain it in ways that everybody can understand. And also, I think research can really benefit from practice in a way of bringing new research questions on the plate that people haven't thought of before, like intervention research, and find out is this really a successful intervention, and what are actually the effects of, for example, empathic listening. What happens when we do that? Well, so that's where I'm hoping to go.
Well, I'm kind of coming from it from the angle I'm already converted to that we need a culture of empathy, that we need more empathy in the world. So I'm really looking at strategies and approaches and processes that can foster building a culture of empathy, which is raising the level of empathy within society so that empathy becomes like a primary social value. So I'm just wondering what you think about that.
Well, I'm not sure I have an answer to this question. How do we build a culture of empathy? Because you probably have to work on very different levels, like the individual levels or society levels, and politically and economic systems. But as a psychologist, my focus is on the individual mostly. So as a psychologist, I'm very happy that empathy can be learned and can be trained. Even a one-day empathy training sometimes have a very good effect, and this compassion meditation has a really good effect too. And I think that, my personal idea would be that for some people, it's maybe helpful to have this, classic empathy training and sort of just connecting more to other people. And then I see other people who are already very empathic in the way that they're very sensitive towards what other people are feeling. And that sometimes can be problematic too, because if you get too much of negative feelings from other people, you have to find a way to protect yourself, right? So this is where emotion regulation sometimes comes in the model of empathy. For example, the model that DCT uses. He says that you have this bottom-up processing of emotional information coming in from somebody else, but then you also have to regulate yourself in a top-down way, because if you don't do that, you just feel bad, and then you're not able to develop this emotional concern for somebody else because you just feel personal distress. For example, if I sit in my office and a coworker is coming in and starts complaining because she has a really bad day, and I feel like she's dropping all this bad emotion all over my office, and I can really feel how she's feeling because I start feeling the same way, then maybe I would have the urge to kick her out just to protect myself. I think in this way, it's really important, if you want to spread a culture of empathy, that we also learn to regulate our own emotions. And when we feel this coming in of bad emotions from somebody else, that you try to regulate yourself in a way that you're able to stay open to the other person and not block them out because it's unpleasant. And I think that's also something that should be included in empathy training. I'm sure it is. I'm not so familiar with empathy trainings in practice, but I think a lot of people would benefit from this part too, so that empathy should also include an emotional regulation component.
Yeah, there's that part where if you're very empathic and you're kind of open to the mirroring of others, that you're really taking in a lot of different emotions, and if there's like a lot of negative emotions, you're holding that, and it might be too overwhelming. and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I've had some interesting experiences when I tried Tai Chi. I don't know if have you ever tried that?
Yeah, I've done Tai Chi.
Okay, so you know this, right? That when somebody attacks you, you ground yourself and you think towards the ground, and you sort of channel that the energy of the attack into the ground, and in this way deflect it from yourself. And in this, when you do that, you can really stand very firm, and people can't throw you off your feet. And I find that also works in a metaphorical way. So sometimes I do that when I feel that all these emotions coming in from outside, and very negative emotions, very strong emotions. I try not to shield myself, but to open myself up, and then channel all this into the ground, and that works really well for me. So that's one thing that I learned in Tai Chi that I sometimes find very helpful in empathy as well.
So there's going to be different strategies for how do you deal with the emotions of others, and one is kind of grounding it, just imagining it going into the ground. Is that?
Yes. Now you're paraphrasing.
Yeah,
me,
now
right?
I'm paraphrasing. I'm doing. We're just not talking about it. We're doing it here.
Right. We're practicing it.
We're practicing it. That's what we should do more of that. It kind of ties into, there's this whole field of empaths and highly sensitive people that one of the main components of that is this being overwhelmed by the emotions of others. And I actually have in my dance, I've been telling you about Ava, who she's actually from Germany, and she's kind of holds the space and holds the class. And I keep talking to her about empathy, but she says, I have too much empathy. I have to block it out, right? And it's exactly for what you're talking about, is that she feels overwhelmed by it. And a lot of the people who are overwhelmed by it, I've noticed, and I've talked to several others too, they say that growing up, they didn't feel heard or seen, and they didn't develop a real strong sense of self. And so it's like how to kind of deal with that. And this whole, are you familiar with the empath community? Have you heard that term, or do you know what I'm talking about there?
No, I haven't heard that.
Oh,
what is that?
They're people who say that they're very empathic, and that they're like, it's also empaths, and they're highly sensitive. Empathically sensitive. They can read the energy in a room, they can read the energy or the emotions of others, but they tend to get overwhelmed by the negativity of it, if there's a lot of negativity. And I'm really wondering about that, because you're talking about regulating. How do you deal with this? And that's a real interest to me too, of how do you deal with that emotional overwhelm. And, you mentioned Tai Chi, as you learn how to kind of move the energy, right? It's a kind of energy. And then there's also Aikido, which is very much along those lines as well. I've done some interviews with Aikido, martial arts kind of people. And that's very much around the same thing. You don't want to harm the other person, but you just don't want to take on their energy. And you want to keep, holding their humanity as well. So there's a lot of different kind of aspects to this. The one thing I wonder about that is using reflection to maintain a sense of self. If your coworker is coming into the office and highly agitated, can you just reflect, reflect what it is that they're doing, and that keeps you from being overwhelmed by it and taking it on, as another strategy.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. That could probably work. I haven't tried it yet, but I think if you paraphrase somebody, you sort of you distance yourself in a way that you have to assume some meta perspective.
Yeah.
And this way, maybe this would help to, not be overwhelmed, because you're sticking to something, you sort of feel like you're looking from above. And sometimes people also use that technique that they are trying to see the situation from outside themselves. this is also used in psychotherapy, sometimes in trauma therapy, that because this takes out the emotional intensity. If you don't look through your own eyes, but you look at yourself experiencing that emotion in the situation. So that would be interesting to try that.
Yeah, that's the route I've been looking at because I really see that it's like the work that you're doing on paraphrasing is really about kind of reflecting back where the person is. They're able to feel heard and seen, but yet also see it from a different perspective as well. And it has some kind of a healing kind of a quality to it. And that's kind of the route I'm seeing for people who are like highly empathic. Is the way to deal with it, instead of kind of being defensive about it, is to actually just learn how to reflect what it is that you're experiencing. But then also, I call it calling for a culture of empathy, which means not just me going and reflecting everyone, that we really need to change society so everybody's reflecting everyone else, because I need to be seen too, So, and how do we kind of foster that and create, strategies and whatnot to support that?
Well, I think there's good reason to believe that, if you start treating somebody in an empathic way, that they will also start treating you in an empathic way. Like maybe not everybody, not all the time, but there's a lot of research that points in that direction, right? So that empathy is contagious in a way, just like emotions are contagious. And I think, we do know that the capacity for empathy is inherent in all human beings. So I think it's just a way of enabling people to do what's natural to them anyways. And just, break down some defenses they need maybe because they don't know how to cope with certain things, like being overwhelmed or feeling attacked. And maybe I'm being idealistic, but I think if you try to find a way around these defenses, that empathy would come naturally to everybody. And just sort of following up on what you said before, I remember I have a friend who's done Zen meditation for a few years, and we talked about the very same topic that we are talking about now. Like, how do you deal with all this emotion overwhelming you coming, for example, when I sit in the subway and there are people sitting around me and I feel this very negative energy coming from them. And he said that if you try to fight it, it will stick with you. So don't try to fight it, just let it flow through you. And that's also something that we do in coaching or in mediation. Like the way I try to do it is I just focus on being empty. And I don't try to reflect anything back or just defend myself or keep my borders up, but just, let it pass through me and not let it stick. And I think that maybe also be a way to, get around these defensive borders. So maybe if people learn that, it would be easier for everybody to be empathic.
Yeah. There's the other part is too the resilience part, which is we're, like I mentioned, we're starting up these empathy circles, and we have about 4 of them going right now. So we meet weekly for 2 hours, and we actually do reflective listening is a major part of it, and we're looking to add more layers on top of it, kind of imaginative empathy, and we're adding a conflict resolution component. So I actually did that too. I created a circle with 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans, here in the United States, right? The political, got this big, so I had them both talking to each other and reflecting each other too. So that was kind of fun. So I kind of want to do more of that. And then we just had a conflict in one of our circles that, where people are supposed to show up. Somebody didn't show up. And then we're sitting around waiting, and it really got me irritated, right? So now we're going to have a restorative empathy circle around that, and use kind of these, mediation processes within the circle. But I guess what I'm saying is for that to develop that empathy, it seems that we need to develop an empathy practice, and that we need to be empathized with. It's just not us going and empathizing with the world, but that we need to be in environments where we're kind of seen and felt and reflected as well to build up our own resilience, our empathic resilience.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. And I think that also fits what you said earlier, that people need to have a sense of self that's, very strong and secure. And in order to have that, you need to feel validated and acknowledged, and you need to be treated in an empathic way. So it's not a one-way road.
Yeah.
You can't demand that people are empathic if nobody's being empathic towards them.
Yeah, that's the core
I'm really
part.
interested. Yeah, but I'm interested in hearing more about these empathy circles that you do. What's the kind of topics that you usually talk about?
Well, we start off with our intention, and the intention is to build a culture of empathy, and that means self-empathy, empathy within the circle, empathy within our family, friends, and in all of society. So it's really geared towards societal transformation, which I think is what you're interested in, right? With that conflict, how do you make that connection and transformation, but doing it at a societal level. And so we start with that. We kind of put out the intention, and then we do some, kind of a little bit of meditation. We do kind of connecting into ourselves, find some kind of emotion, and then we kind of do it. And everybody mirrors. So we start off with that mirroring, and we go from one person to the next, and everybody mirrors everyone else, right? So we get into that synchronization. Then once we've done that, we go into, okay, our intention is to build a culture of empathy. How are we going to build a culture of empathy? And then somebody will start speaking, and they'll speak to someone else in the group, and that person reflects back, paraphrasing exactly what you're talking about, back to that person, and that person can speak until they feel fully heard and kind of comprehended, and then it's the turn of that other person to speak, and then they speak to someone else, and then until they're fully heard, and then that person speaks to someone else until they're fully heard, and it just kind of keeps going back and forth like that for like an hour or hour, or so, hour and a half. And so we're kind of getting a little bit of an empathy bath, as well as we're setting the intention to build more empathy. So we're using empathy to build more empathy. And so we have, and then we kind of come to a close and we do some writing. We have a shared Google Doc. We kind of write our notes down about the session, the circle, and then we kind of discuss that, and then that's kind of the close. And we just we're building a user guide and wanting to add other layers to it. That's kind of the basic layer, but then to bring in kind of imaginative empathy, the role taking, whatever processes we can add. So it's going to be like an ongoing, lifelong, kind of a circle, I hope, these circles growing. And we have like 220 people on the wait list now to kind of join circles. So,
yeah, I can imagine that people might feel really good after that.
Yeah. And adding conflict resolution, process too. We're just kind of developing that process now. So I was kind of hoping maybe you might have some insights of like processes we can add too at some point. Well, maybe we can, discuss that more in another dialogue. I'd love to have you talk with my partner that I'm working with, Liedewij Niesink. She has a PhD in empathy, and she's out of Holland. So we're working together on developing this. I'm sure she'd enjoy chatting with you about this too.
Yes, I'd enjoy that very much too. I've seen some of the video talk you've done with her. So that's the one you called Lily, right?
Oh yeah, Lily. I could never, to begin with, I couldn't pronounce her name. Those Dutch names are too hard to pronounce. But I've kind of gotten it down now. So maybe I just noticed you have some partners that you're working with on your studies. Do you want to just mention them and who they are and what their backgrounds?
Yes, I do this study with Christine Prehn and Philipp Kratzer and Malek Bajbuch. And Malek Bajbuch is the professor in the group. And he's a psychiatrist and a physician and a professor at the Free University. Christine is a psychologist as well. And she's working at the Cluster of Excellence, and she's doing different projects on emotion regulation through language. For example, she has studies that look into how do people feel when they verbalize their emotions, or when they have to lie about their emotions or tell the truth about their emotions. Philip is also another PhD student like myself, but he's from a programming background, and he does very complex technical things that I'm sometimes not able to do in my own studies. So he helps a lot with the programming of the experiments, which I'm very grateful for. So this is sort of the small group that I work in right now, but there's also a lot of other people in the cluster who all work together, and who will also be taking part in the other studies.
Oh, well, great. Well, this has really been a fun dialogue. I'm so glad to have connected with you, because this is really an area that I think needs a lot of work and study, and that you're bringing in the scientific study. I'm really excited about it, because it really overlaps really in the kind of direction that we're working on. So I hope we can kind of keep the dialogue going, and maybe do some talk with Levi, or have another discussion and kind of go into more depth around this. Maybe there's some form of collaboration with our empathy circles. We'd love to put some of the members in the fMRI and see what's going on in their brains,
Yes, I would like that. I would also like to hear more about the kind of work you do, and how you build that center and everything. So I would really like to have another talk with you and your colleague, Lillian.
Okay, well, great. We'll line that up then, and look forward to that. Maybe in another couple of weeks or so we can have that.
Okay.
Okay. Well, great.
Well, great talking to you.
Thank you, Maria. It's wonderful chatting.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
See the world through other people's eyes. Empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.